Hello everyone, my name's Kyle, and this will be the first video of my YouTube lecture series on Islamic finance. So let's start it off with the basics. What is Islamic finance? So as the name implies, it's going to be a banking system. Now, Islamic finance, opposed to most banking systems set up in the first world, is asset-backed, where most banking systems here in the United States or Europe work on a fractional reserve system. So that's going to be one of the biggest differences that you see with it. Now, of course, you could say, but wait, the housing market is mostly asset-backed, which is true. However, there's a number of derivatives and compounds that happen in there that Islamic finance really doesn't allow for or is not designed to carry on. So what makes it different, aside from just how it's done on a physical sense of asset or fractional reserve? So the message comes from the Quran, and one of my favorite quotes on Islamic finance from the Quran is, "Allah will deprive usury of all blessing, but give an increase for deeds of charity." So usury means charging a very high interest. So what this quote means directly is that God or Allah is going to take away all blessing if you charge a high interest. However, if you do things for charity or the kindness of your heart, you're going to be given more blessing. So one of the most misleading things about Islam is that people believe that it's a much more complete way of life as opposed to other religions, which is not the case. So if you look at Judaism, they have the way of the Torah, Muslims follow the straight path of Islam, Buddhists follow the middle path, Hindus follow the righteous way, also known as Dharma, and then Taoists talk about the Tao, which is the unspoken way. So it's actually very much not true to believe that Islam is a complete way of life compared to other religions, because most religions intertwine virtuous behavior with everyday life. And Islam is a relatively fractured religion, in part because there's no central governing authority, kind of like the Pope in Catholicism. So there's a number of different sects to Islam. So what I'm going to try to do is take a very general approach to the overview of all of them. I'll try to give you some specific examples. However, Islam is based very much not just in religious history, but it's also based in a geopolitical history, which, because I did not live in those countries, makes it a little bit harder for me to extrapolate this information. So with Islam, there's really 5 basic principles, or what's known as 5 pillars. So the first one is going to be a dedication to faith. And that's why most Islamic banks have this Sharia board, which is people who go through the banking practices of their bank to make sure that it follows the rules written out in the Quran, also highlighted in the Hadith. The second one is going to be obligatory prayer, which is why most Islamic banks actually have a room specifically designed for praying to Mecca during the day. The third pillar would be compulsory giving. So the way that a lot of these bank accounts work in Islamic finance is they have profit sharing. So instead of just having a set interest rate that's usually abysmally small that you would see in the United States, theirs fluctuates a little bit, so that way if the bank's doing well, everyone does well. They also have specific loan practices to give out to the poor. So what ends up happening is they'll issue things like no-fault loans to impoverished communities to try to help grow the infrastructure within their community. The fourth pillar of Islam would be the Ramadan fast. I unfortunately can't find anything that relates to banking. If you know something that ties this in, please drop a comment, let me know, I'd love to find out. And then the fifth one is going to be the pilgrimage to Mecca. And most Islamic banks actually have accounts specifically designed to save up money for your pilgrimage to Mecca. So although all financial products and tools are designed to specifically reflect these 5 pillars, with it being mostly asset-backed, it changes it a little bit because a lot of other banks in the world don't operate exactly on this function. So what ends up happening is for Islamic banks to remain competitive with the Western banks, they then end up having to do different practices than they had done originally, which, although it does let them compete on a global scale, typically they also manage to keep the word of the Quran, but it usually violates the spirit that was put forth in it. And it's no surprise that Islam is going to be one of the few religions that has a very detailed banking system because Muhammad himself was a merchant. Islam, from its beginning, justified private property and business profit, which it took Christianity centuries to get to that point. For a long time, they believed that being a merchant was considered a dirty or unworthy way of life. So as we continue through this, we're going to talk about different practices that Islamic banks have. I'm going to talk about positive and negative aspects to it, as well as a couple of unique cases throughout the history of Islamic banking. If there's anything else that you think I should go into greater detail with on this series, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you for watching.